I am good. How are you, Gunj?
Good, good. You look very bright. I mean, it's 8 a.m. where I am right now. So I believe it's 7:30 for you in LA.
Yes, yes, it is.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just using some extra lighting, otherwise it would be a bit too dark.
Yeah, you look bright and shiny.
Oh,
And really an honor to come here and participate on your platform, Celine.
yeah.
We go back 2 decades. We did university together. We
Yes, we
were, in fact,
did.
roommates. And
Yeah.
I have always admired your fascination and, acceptance of different cultures around the world. For all of our friends who've joined in, the ones who don't know Celine, I'm going to give a brief introduction. I'm going to keep it a little formal because I think Celine deserves everything that I have to say about her. So Celine is a blogger, podcaster, and a journalist. She went to University of Southern California to do her master's in journalism there. She's a writer and founder of the Dreamcatcher, a blog community that connects and encourages people to live their dream life and make a difference in the world. All of you who are looking at creating your dream life, go online, search for the Catcher, subscribe to her newsletter. Every week, she sends a newsletter on a very important subject regarding personal development. I look forward to it every weekend. I would advise you go online and subscribe as well. Her inspirational messages has been attracting thousands of readers every month from all over the world since 2014. Her critically acclaimed book, Beauty Redefined: How to Feel Authentically Beautiful in Today's World, was published in 2018. So if you go to Celine's Instagram page and if you go to her bio, you will get access to the first few chapters of her book. I strongly recommend you read that, buy her book, and support her in this journey. I'm really honored to be here. I remember when I was in college with Celine, she was very involved with understanding the human behavior and the nuances of it. And really, Celine, I have a question for you. So I've always told you, admire this about you, the fact that you are from UAE, Dubai more specifically, but you are of Indian origin.
Yeah,
You lived in Sweden for a while,
I
and
did.
now you live in LA.
Yes.
So you've been, you have experienced different cultures in your lifetime. How has your experience been? What's been your takeaway?
Well, as you mentioned, I grew up in Dubai. First of all, thank you so much for that very that amazing introduction. I don't know who you're talking about. But no, but I just want to say, Gunjan and I, before I answer your question, I just want to say Gunjan and I, we're such good friends. As she mentioned, we were roommates or apartment mates back in the early 2000s when we went to college together in Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and we had such a great time together, and we really clicked from that time. We just had this camaraderie. We were able to get each other, and little did we know that it's because we share this interest in human behavior, and we're guided by this vision to really make the world a better place. And we didn't know that consciously, but I think on an unconscious level, we were drawn to each other as friends because we sensed that we were both kind of different. And yeah, it's so I'm
We
just,
didn't really see each other becoming published authors, did we? We
no, we
never
did not.
spoke about
At that
writing a
time, we were
book
just,
or sharing pieces of our written work with each other. And here
yes,
we are with, you know, best-selling books and planning more in the
yeah,
future and in our journey of podcasting and blogging about what matters in
yeah,
the world. So, yeah, but
yes.
tell me about your experience of being in so many different countries. What's has it been for you like?
Well, first of all, Dubai, as you know, it's an international city. It's a melting pot. We have people from all over the world. But there is a big South Asian diaspora. So that I was definitely exposed to the Indian culture, the Asian culture growing up. But at the same time, we would travel to the US almost every year because my dad had business associates in San Francisco, and we would also travel to other parts of the world. So I got exposed to all these cultures and these countries. And so I didn't have a very traditional upbringing, and my mom particularly is pretty open-minded. So I had the opportunity to build an identity that was not solely based on culture, but on my interests and my hobbies. As you know, I'm inspired by a lot of personal development gurus, spiritual gurus, and even performing artists for that matter. I love Walt Disney. So all of these people had an impact on my values and how I perceive the world and the people in it. So
Yeah.
so I think and that wasn't a problem for me, but I only felt different. I felt like an anomaly, a black sheep when I was in very traditional settings and I dealt with people who were still very traditional in their thinking, very closed-minded. And that bothered me for the longest time. I felt like there was something wrong with me. I was made to feel guilty by some people that I wasn't Indian enough. And but fortunately, I grew out of that guilt and I realized that it's actually an asset to have such an open mind and to be able to interact with people from other countries and feel so comfortable doing that, not feeling that awkwardness. I realized that that's actually a strength that I can really use in my career and in my personal life and all areas of my life. So I think that's something I really want to get across to women out there who feel like they're confused because of pressure that they face from other people. I just want them to know that it's okay to be who you are and to borrow your values from different places outside your culture. So yeah, that's my key takeaway. And I'm grateful that I had this non-traditional upbringing because it's really made me curious and broadened my horizons.
Bravo to that.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you too have lived in a lot of other countries, Gunjan. I mean, you have lived and studied in India, the United States, of course, Singapore, Switzerland, and the UK. So I'm curious to know, how did that impact your identity, and what did you take away from your time living in all those places?
So, living in different countries, of course, has massively influenced my personality. It's opened my eyes to different cultures, perspectives, and lifestyles. India itself is a blend of different cultures. I mean, if you go to North India and South India, it's completely different. So, as Indians, we are very welcoming to different traditions. But of course, having studied in 5 different countries really truly made me a global citizen. And it also made me realize that at our core, we are all the same people. We all are craving for kindness and love. And a smile is the same everywhere in the world, no matter what language you say. And I also developed much more understanding of cultures other than mine. And I feel I'm confident now, if I have to settle anywhere in the world, I will be able to do that just because I have traveled and lived in so many different places. Even when I was in India, I went to 3 or 4 different schools because we traveled so much as a family. And then I traveled a lot for my education. I came back. I lived in Bombay for 3 years when I was doing the book. So it all just gave me a more inclusive point of view towards the world. You know, Individually, I think I learned a lot about family and faith living in my home country, India. I will be talking a little bit about that as we go along. The amount of significance that we give in India to a loving family and following our faith is immense. So India taught me the value of family and faith. Switzerland gave me, uh, really kind of gave me the finishing touches. I went for my finishing school. I did my diploma in international etiquette and protocol over there. And being in the beautiful landscape of, gorgeous beauty, just and immense class just opened me up to a different level of international protocols. US made me more independent and aggressive. It taught me ambition. And if I am independent today, which I am very much compared to my, you know, uh, the local community here, is because of my experience of living in America, which is
Mhm.
really having a mind of your own. And UK made me, it truly made me a global citizen. I mean, if you walk down any street in the UK, in
Mhm.
London, I lived in London for 2 years. If you walk
Oh,
down any street in London,
yeah.
you are going to be hearing so many different languages. It's
Yes.
really the melting pot of different cultures. So if
Yeah.
there's any place in the world that really embraces different cultures, it's London. I mean, Dubai is not far away. I mean, Dubai is really an amalgamation of different cultures as well.
It really is. Yeah.
But UK just made my eyes open up, to what it is to be a citizen of the world. So I've had a lot of interesting experience living in different places in India and living in different places globally.
Mhm.
And I would strongly advise people that if they're not able to go abroad for their education, go backpacking. There is nothing like going away, shedding your identity and building a new one, because a lot of who we are has been gifted to us by our forefathers. In the sense, I'm an Indian girl with XYZ values. These have all been gifted to me by my parents and my forefathers. When I go abroad, I can shed all of that and be myself and be just Gunjan and choose to be who I want to be. So uh, I feel going abroad not just opens your eyes, uh, but also allows you to really reevaluate who you are in this world. Besides the strengths that comes along with being a family member of, an Indian community. So
Yeah.
it's just very interesting to be in different places. But I love being home. There's nothing like being back home. I live in Kolkata, which is really which is one of the major cities of India.
Yeah.
But in India, we give so much value and importance to family that being here to my family, with my family, is just the most beautiful experience. And I think we are a product of, you know, the values that have been gifted to us by our parents. And for you, it was, the exposure you received when you were studying, when you were traveling with your father to San Francisco and different places. And I remember your love for Disney and performing arts. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's still there. It's still there. And, I love what you just said. It seems that you were able to learn how to balance your love for the values that you learned as an
Yeah.
Indian, love for family, and at the same time, I think you took the best of both worlds, right? You were able to
I
take
hope
from your
so.
culture, and you were able to take from Western values, as we can call them. But for
Okay.
those out there who are struggling to do that, could you share how you were able to find that balance between your native culture and Western values as this independent thinking and ambitious woman that you are?
Okay. So, I think cultures are ever growing and ever evolving depending on the people and its community. For example, in India, sati was really popular, a century ago, and we have evolved. So I
Mhm.
think, the evolution in our value system continues to happen as we grow older.
Mhm.
But it's really important not just to take the values given to us by our forefathers, but to also understand the changing tides of time and to embrace a new way of living. Um, I think also it's not very right now to say the West is forward thinking and East is conventional thinking. Anyone
Mhm.
who comes to India or lives in Vietnam or China would understand how progressive we've become. And, perhaps we've become more cultural and embracing than the West at the moment.
Yeah.
Um, but I will also advise anyone who's coming from Asia to a different country is to understand what you like about your own culture and study the culture of the new country that you're being introduced to. Understand your future goals and
Mhm.
understand what are the core values you want to keep with you as you work towards your future goal. and try and be an amalgamation of two different cultures, because we have to embrace where we're living. When in Rome, do what Romans are doing. So I think it's important to understand your own values that you don't want to compromise, but also understand the nuances of living in a different place, understand and study that culture, and try and embrace it. I think the more we embrace different cultures, the greater we're going to evolve as individual spirits.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's really important to do, especially if you're planning to immigrate to a new country and you just have to prepare and know who you are, but at the same time be prepared to blend in. So, I mean, this is a good segue to my next question for you. You know, foreign immigrants are often expected to embrace excuse me, to blend in instead of embracing their differences. And what are your thoughts on this? And have you personally experienced it?
So, I think people don't like it when they see someone different,
Hmm.
someone talking differently, looking differently. It makes them feel very unsettled. And
Hmm.
it's everywhere in the world. We don't like the unknown. We like familiarity. We like a comfort zone.
Hmm.
So, when we're exposed to different cultures, it's very important to first acknowledge the discomfort or the feeling of fear that you yourself are having, and
Yeah.
not respond to that with the same feelings of passive defense or attack. And also to understand we all are individuals at the end of the day. Celine, I was watching a movie the other day, and it was about an astronaut who'd gone to moon and was returning back, and he was looking at Earth, and Earth looked like just of 8 billion people, of just brothers and sisters, because at the end of the day, the borders we've given to our countries are man-made. So I think at the end of the day, if you start realizing that your geographical identity is borrowed, and not the reality, and we are literally just one humanity, a lot of issues with trying to accept and embrace differences would just dissolve automatically. And that's what 2020 has taught us, right? That we one humanity, that we can't run away. And the differences in status quo to, religion to region to skin color to gender are just differences that are more of mindset, because to nature we're just one. And I think we all have to, it's a work in progress for each one of us to evolve ourselves, where we don't take the biases that have been given to us by the community, but we
Hmm.
make our own judgment about other cultures and other religions. So in India, there's of course always a fight against the caste system that's
Oh,
constantly
yeah.
happening.
That is
In
quite.
America, we recently experienced the Black Matters,
Oh, yeah.
George Floyd, the death of George
Yeah,
Floyd, which really kind of caused rage, and
absolutely.
rightfully so. But you tell me, Celine, I'm going to digress here, and instead of me answering this question further, I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you. You moved to LA after living in Dubai for a while. I mean, you did have a stint in Sweden, but you were
Yeah.
in Dubai for a decade.
Yeah.
And Dubai is extremely Western in its approach, but not like living in LA. So, what was it like for you to migrate here? Did you feel there was a difference in the way people perceived you now that you're a professional there? Do you have to fight the culture battle on a daily basis? And how do you do it?
Well, I don't. For me, as I told you, I've traveled to the US so many times, so it didn't feel like I was in a foreign country. But in terms of people perceiving me, um, I because LA, like any other major American city, is so diverse and there are people from different races. I could blend in. I could blend in, but since I went straight to grad school, University of Southern California. I think um I think people there I felt like there were times when people had some preconceived notions about who I could be based on the way I looked, but it's once I started talking, then they could see that, oh, she doesn't have a very strong accent, or she knows what she's talking about. So I felt like there were some instances where I sort of had to prove myself because I'm not American and I'm not local. I felt that I had to prove myself a little bit, but not with everyone, because there were, like, with the instructors and the professors who are exposed to many cultures, and they seemed pretty open-minded, and they didn't have that. But I felt like amongst the students, because I was dealing with younger students, who a lot of them who haven't traveled outside the United States. So I think there was a little bit of, I had to deal with that. But for the most part, it was fine. But once you get out into the world and you start working, which I am now, right now, it's not a problem. As long as you know what you're talking about, and you know your stuff, and you sound okay, like you don't have a super strong accent, and your English is good, you're pretty much accepted. And I mean, looks wise, it wasn't an issue because I'm what they would call, I look racially ambiguous. Like I could be from anywhere.
Very pretty as well, right?
Oh, thank you.
A very pretty, racially ambiguous female who could be
But I
from
mean,
anywhere in the world.
so I mean, I don't face like a problem in that sense. So yeah, just to answer your question, yeah, I did experience that a little bit, but internally, I didn't have any problems fitting in because this feels like my second home. Doesn't feel foreign to me.
But I'm going to go ahead and ask you this question because I was always curious about this. Can you recall a situation where you experienced a vast cultural difference because you are so well exposed to different cultures? Despite that, did you ever experience a very strong culture difference? And how did you go about dealing with it, Seline?
The funny thing is, I I tend to feel the difference in values in any, it doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be Indian, but any place, any culture, any group setting that has people who are closed-minded and ignorant. So there can be conservative people anywhere on the planet. I mean, it could be like, for example, in America, in the southern states, if you go to like Alabama, or no offense to anyone who is from there, but you know what I mean? The really closed communities who don't want to look beyond their prejudice, who don't want to look beyond the stereotypes. I have problems there, and I have met some ignorant people uh, along the way, unfortunately, and I'm sure you have too, who just, judge you based on these stereotypes that they are aware of. And I think that's a problem for me. But within the Indian community, I have a problem with people who are overly traditional. I think traditions are great. I think they should be celebrated. We should be proud of our heritage. But it's an issue when you try to force other people, even if they're in your community, to adopt those. It's like, so don't assume that what's true for you is going to be true for the other person. And this is something I've encountered quite frequently within my own family and with my relatives, uh, because if you can't expect me or any other girl who's been exposed to other cultures to adopt a traditional mindset, because it's not possible. And I think that you need to be tolerant of people who are different and have the compassion to extend that freedom to everybody, that they can subscribe to any belief system, any way of living and being, if it resonates with them. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's my biggest issue. Like I face friction with people who are conservative and traditional and are not willing to see things differently. because there's
Yeah.
always a different way of seeing every single thing on the planet. I don't know if you read this book, Sapiens by
Okay.
Yuval Harari.
Okay.
He defined culture as these it's just fiction, right? It's fictitious beliefs created by human beings. It's not the truth. It's not the truth. And that's what people need to get. It's a human construct, cultural values, cultural belief systems. It's something that we created so that we can develop a sense of community, a sense of order, um, to guide us, to make life less complex. It gives us a sense of control, but it's not the truth. Truth is science, right? You
Yeah.
can't deny gravity. You can't deny the laws of the universe.
Yeah.
But anything that has nothing to do with the laws of the universe is fictitious. It's fiction. It's something we created. So I don't see it as truth. But if it resonates with you and it makes sense to you on a spiritual level or even on a rational level, then do it. Then do it for sure. I'm not against being traditional at all. But it has to
Yeah.
resonate with you and it has to feel true to who you are. And making other people try to buy into that is oppression. It's autocratic, and I don't think it's the right thing to do.
As a woman of color in a Western world, uh, I'm sure you appreciate it sometimes for being more Western, right? Like you said, sometimes in the Indian community, you are maybe perhaps judged for being very Western, but in the Western community, you perhaps looked, liked more because you're more Western. But and I'm sure they all come back and say to you, you look so different from the other Indian women. You dress far better than the other Indians. You look more non-Indian because of your lighter skin and sharper features. And like you said, no one can really guess where you're from. They keep guessing, are you from the Caribbean islands? Or are you from, South America? Are you from the Middle East? I mean, you're a huge enigma to most people out there. But so, these statements which are made rather casually about you being not very Indian, how do you respond to that?
It's so sad, but I used to take it as a compliment. Especially in a place like Dubai, where when they tell you don't look Indian, that means that you look good. I mean, uh, there's that uh, undercurrent of, yeah, Indians look a certain way, and that's not attractive.
Yeah.
So that is really, really sad for me. I'm flattered that it is a compliment, but at the same time, it makes me so sad because it comes out of pure ignorance. India
Yeah.
is such a big country with so much beautiful diversity in terms of language, in terms of looks. We have people with all kinds of features and skin tones. We got light skin, we got dark skin, of course, we got brown. We got sharp features, not so sharp features. So, and there are 1 billion of us. So just to say that you don't look, and you don't even know, you cannot pigeonhole somebody's looks. And there are Indian women who are extraordinarily beautiful. Have you seen some of the Bollywood actresses? We have Aishwarya Rai, Deepika Padukone, and Priyanka Chopra, who's now really popular in the West. To say that you don't look Indian is just pure ignorance. And another thing is that you don't sound Indian. And it's like, do you expect every Indian to sound like Apu from The Simpsons? That's ridiculous. It's that's something I face a lot. It's like, oh, you're Indian, but you don't sound Indian. You sound American. And then there are some people who say, oh, you sound American, but you have hints of Indian. It's like, why is that such a big deal, right? It's like, this is the way I sound. As long as you're understanding what I'm saying, it shouldn't be a problem, right? I'm clear and I make sense to you. That's all that should matter. And I don't think it's just Indians that face it. I think people from every single country have to deal with this.
Absolutely agree.
So it's sad, and again, it comes from that ethnocentric, ignorant mindset. You should just let people be who they are. They sound that way, that's fine. They look that way, that's fine. Look at them as a soul.
I agree
That's
with
what I would say. They are a soul, they're a human being first before anything else. Everything else is just labels. So get rid of it.
Yeah, and they're just prejudices that we borrowed again from generations before us. So I agree with you. I think we have to be part of this movement where we we promise ourselves and we influence others to look at every human being for who they are, as part of their spirit, but not who they look to be. Like, we have to get rid of the racial discrimination and the body shaming and the accent shaming and everything, and just just the kind of with our current president in America, the kind of fallout that's happening, with 2020, the immigrants from China suffering now in America, with 9/11, the Arabs really, felt defeated and judged, So there's constantly a racial battle that's happening, and we have to fight that. We've got to start looking at people for who they are from the inside, and not, the labels that they have, they've been gifted because of where they've been born. So thank you, Seline, for, bringing up this very crucial point and for enlightening us with your thought process.
I just want to add, I think it's because we're so visual, we're so tribal by nature that we like to kind of have that us versus them mentality, and that's so I think we just need to grow out of that, and I think the only way to do that is through education. Education is the only way. Like Malala Yousafzai, she's the one who's really advocating schooling for young girls in countries like Pakistan and any other countries where young girls are oppressed. I mean, she's a very inspirational, Malala Yousafzai, don't you think? Like she's really trying to change.
Courageous.
Very courageous, and I think we need people like her to change people's perception of how women from certain cultures should live, and that they deserve an education just as Western women do.
Absolutely. And I think for grown-ups, it's more about getting out and traveling the world. Get out of your own country and see parts of the world that are very foreign to you. And you'll start appreciating the different colors and cultures that the traditions and the festivals. I mean, if you come to India, if anyone comes to India from outside, they're just taken aback by the variety of, the Indian cuisine, right? I mean, every state has its own cuisine and
cuisine, own language.
The language, yes, absolutely. Oh my God.
There's so much diversity in one country. It's like
it's one of the most populated countries in the world as well. So but
right. Okay, so Gunj, I'm curious to know if there was a situation, and I know there probably have been many, where you had to choose between cultural values, whether you want to represent a more Asian or Western kind of stance. So was there any specific incident that you experienced?
Not many, just because all the places I went to, whether it was Switzerland, Singapore, or London, I went for my education, and we were a very diverse set of, class population. So I have been able to embrace, and I've been accepted in different scenarios and different cultures extremely well. But I think where I found there to be a little clash for me, uh, in terms of Western versus Indian value, is how we define family in India and the values that come with it. So when I came back from India after completing my education, I of course experienced a little bit of culture shock, because when I was leaving America, when I was leaving London, I did have an option of, joining a company there. I did have offers and a prospect of a fat paycheck. But the Indian values of living with your family is so strong. And, if you live with your family, it's a matter of, it's your, show to the world that you respect and love your family. So I had the option of staying back and really being my independent self, or coming back to India and being with people because they really wanted me to come back. So there was a conflict there, and of course chose to come back because there's nothing like, being home. And in India, in America, after 18, you're expected to move out and you
That's
perhaps just come together as a family on Thanksgiving or on Christmas. But in India, there's nothing like a family's home, your parents' house and your house. It's your house. Your parents' house is your
I
house.
have to say,
You know?
can I just jump in here? This
Yeah.
reminds me of an interview I saw with Aishwarya Rai and David Letterman like many
Okay.
years ago. And she was, and he called her out on the fact that she still lives with her parents because at that time she
Yeah.
wasn't married. And
Yeah.
for him, it was like, oh, that's weird. And she's like, well, I don't need to make appointments for dinner with my parents, and then he was
Yeah.
like taken off guard, and
Yeah.
it was so funny because she was like, well, she was really expressing that the importance of family in the Indian culture, and that it's not a weird thing. It's not something that
I
should
mean,
be
it's
presented as a
actually
thing that,
considered a norm. Like,
yeah,
coming back to India, like if I hear a friend, well, I have a friend in Bombay. Both the brothers don't live with the parents because, the parent chose it to be that way. And I thought that was a normality because in India, you as a norm stay with your family. And even when I was writing my first book, She Walks, She Leads,
yeah,
I was in Bombay
fantastic.
for Thank you. I was in Bombay for 2 years just because I had 150 interviews to do, and most of the interviews were in Bombay. We got home there. I
Yeah,
decided to stay there so I could avoid the travel back and forth. But after the book was done, because of self-employed, my parents requested me to come back. They said, "You're self-employed. You can work from here. You don't need to be in Bombay, and you can travel in and out all the time." And I said, the amount it's going to cost me to just travel in and out of Calcutta and Bombay and body fatigue. They said, no way, this is your house. That's not your house. That's not your home, You can't be spending your traditions and your festivals in a city that's not yours. And
did you like that? Did you really feel that that was what you felt, and that was something that you wanted?
you know, initially I of course wanted to stay back in Bombay because I felt I was carving my own identity.
Hmm.
But I didn't realize that the book had already given me my own identity. So when I'd come back to India, like most of the Indian daughters of industrialist families do, they join back the family business. So I was
Yeah.
working with my father and my brother, and somewhere I felt that my identity was not shining out, although I was putting in my 12 hours of work. So writing the book, and now I'm in the process of publishing my next book in November this year, and two more next year. Uh, Being an author gave me my own, space, my own space in the world. Um, there
And
was,
that's
of course, I was a little defensive about coming back because I had made my own set of circles and my friends and my own community in Mumbai. But there's nothing like the warmth and attention you get when you're in your parents' home in India. It's a very loving circle. That's why the suicide rate in India is so much lower than in the world. I'm not talking about mental health issues. Perhaps it's at par with the world number, just because people
Mhm.
in India are not very educated about mental health. But in terms of suicide, it's actually quite low because because India, everybody lives with family. So you've got that, your dinners are never alone. You've got 5, 6 people sitting with you having meal together, and you share your day together. And especially with this whole lockdown, families have come together. And all my friends who are a little feeling a little lonely and depressed are the ones who are not living with families. Perhaps they're working in a different city in India itself. They have a full-time job. So when they come back, because of the lockdown, they can't step out. But people who are living with family, they are really enjoying. Some of my friends who are living with their families, they find their husbands so much more available. The kids are also, with them all the time. And the in-laws are around. So I think the family culture in India is really beautiful. I did have a little bit of, again, reverse culture shock, just moving from Mumbai to Calcutta, because Calcutta is very different in its value system than Mumbai. Mumbai is very professional, very independent, very fast.
More Western.
Calcutta is very Western. And Mumbai is like New York in many ways, and Calcutta is far more relaxed. So I did have a little bit of culture shock there. But, so I did have this conflict, going back to your question about, do I want to come back when I was finishing my college, my master's and my bachelor's both, whether I wanted to come back to India or not. And then when I was doing my book in Bombay, whether I wanted to stay back there, network, grow my work there, my name, or I wanted to come back home. But I feel at the end of the day, the warmth you get living with people around you who love you, there's nothing in the world that beats that. I mean, at the end of the day, your happiness is so dependent on the relationships around you. And I'm not saying that every Indian family has very healthy relationships. There are families with a lot of passive, aggressive, toxic family members,
Definitely.
who could be giving you a lot of harm and not so much love. But that said, if you are blessed with good relationships around you, a good family life can make your life wonders. It can make you so progressive, so goal-oriented, make you so much better at whatever you want to achieve, and fill you with so much of self-love and self-worth, and your identity would shoot up just because you're around people who fill you with your, with good belief systems. They support you in your dreams. So I feel in India that way we're very lucky. But then that said, the downside is if you're in a family environment that is not very supportive, then what do you do? Right? Because I have a friend, who is on the verge of getting divorced. She's really upset. And now she's really afraid of starting fresh in a different city in India itself, because everyone is with family. So she's going to be like, going to find herself as the odd one out. But yes, this was my big conflict, and I'm happy I chose my Indian roots. But there've been many conflicts when we were in college, right? Dating, like Priyanka Chopra said in an interview that in India we don't date, we go into relationships. Right? The first time you go out with a guy.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think our attitude towards relationships and the way Indians love is quite different from the way I hate making blanket statements like this, but this is what I have found in my experience of dating. Like, the way an Indian loves is quite different. Like, it's
very grounded.
I think I'm gonna leave it at that. I don't ruffle any feathers.
This is a public conversation.
This is a public conversation. Let's leave it at that. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that is a difference that I personally have come across.
Yeah, and I feel that as well. I mean, it's different in India than it was when we were in college. So, Seline, do you think there's a struggle with personal cultural values even as Asians have spread across the globe? Simply because how diverse we are as a continent?
Yeah, so I don't think that's really a concern, because especially like the younger generations of Asians and people from other non-Western countries, the younger generations are more open-minded and they're more willing to assimilate foreign ways of being. And it's because I think of the internet. Through the internet, our world has become limitless, where we can see any video from
Yes.
anywhere, and we have access to social media, where we're like one big global family now. So I think younger people are more open, and they don't experience that much friction anymore, especially with like pop culture. Uh, my niece, she loves K-pop, which is, I don't know if you're familiar with K-pop, but it's Korean pop. And if you go to any part of the world, if girls who are if between ages of 16 to say 19, I think, or roughly that age group, they're gonna love K-pop. Whether you go to Fiji or Nigeria, that age group of teenage girls is gonna love K-pop. So it's pop culture unites people from all over the world.
Yeah.
Um, so that's one thing. So the only place where I think there's a struggle with embracing uh, other other countries' values and cultures, I think, is with older generations. It's more intergenerational. Parents, grandparents who grew up back in the day, they might have a tough time really understanding and embracing the fact that their kids and grandkids
Yeah.
are now coloring outside the cultural lines, that they're
Yeah.
going to be different in their stance and things, and that they're not going to be as close to their roots as they were. And so I think that they have to manage their expectations accordingly and be like, okay, this is the way the world is. We're evolving into a more global society, and people are becoming less traditional. There's no stopping it. In fact, that's progress. So I think that's going to fade away as we move forward, as we get less and less traditional. But I think it's important to have hold on to some of our traditions because it gives us a sense of identity. But also having that side of you that says, okay, I'm open to listening to other people and witnessing other traditions and cultures. I think that's healthy. And that's important, especially if you're traveling to other places or you're planning to work in other places. You have to have some flexibility and some openness. It's healthy, and it just make you a better person.
Celine, I'm just really curious. As someone who is so successful, right? How has your definition of success shifted? How do you think it shifted for women, particularly those who are limited by cultural ideas and expectations? Do you think the meaning of success has changed across generations?
Absolutely. I think it's changing. I mean, look what happened last week. We had Kamala Harris. She is been nominated by Joe. She's been chosen by Joe Biden
Yeah,
as the Democratic vice president nominee, and I think that's a huge neon sign that things are changing. And she's not only a woman, she's a woman of color, and her mother is from India, so she's half Indian. So I think that's
biracial.
she's biracial, but she's a woman who she openly says, "I'm so proud of my Indian heritage. I'm so proud of my Jamaican heritage." But at the same time, she's got her American side, right? She's focused on American policies and improving the country. So she's a good example of someone who's learned to balance East and West. She still honors her ethnic background. I think that's absolutely wonderful. So to get back to your question, I think yes, there is definitely we've come a long way, and there's less pressure for women to conform to those old gender roles, women to conform to those old gender roles of what a woman should be like, that she should be domesticated. And it's now more about embracing our individuality and reaching our highest potential. I think that is becoming more acceptable. This is what I've seen. That's what I witnessed. But I'm sure I think you would be a better person to comment on what's happening in India since you lived there. You've been living there for a while now. So do you think that it's evolved there as well?
Very much. I think there is a large number of uh, women and young girls who are joining workforce that we didn't see earlier. Wall Street Journal had written an article about the daughterly guilt, which means that a lot of young girls would join workforce and then leave it to take care of the elderly in the family because of the pressures they would feel, from their family members and from their spouses. Now that's moved away. A lot of young women, when they're joining a new family life, they're really encouraged in India today to form an identity for themselves and maybe do something part-time, if not full-time, because taking care of children in India is still really important. But you have to also understand that in India, having a child is not a personal decision, it's a family decision. I mean, you have to grow your family. It's an expectation that every family has when you get married to, their son, or
I don't know how that's gonna how are we gonna control the population if that mindset doesn't change? But anyway.
Yeah, I mean, and people don't stop if they have two daughters, they want the third child because they're expecting a son to come. But so yeah, the population debate is, India is going to be taking over, I think, China in terms of population by 2035. But I feel that we've seen a lot of encouragement in the last decade. In-laws and elderlies in the families have now started encouraging and inspiring not just their own daughters, but their daughter-in-laws to, carve their own professional identities. I don't know, is it because of the Western influence, or it's because the mother-in-laws have realized how much they missed in their life because they didn't have the opportunities that the younger generation has now. But we're seeing a huge shift in the number of women joining workforce and double income families. And in India, it really helps because you live with elders who can take care of their grandchildren. So even if women are working and they have 2 or 3 kids, they don't need to worry about who's going to take care of the kids. So there's a lot of support coming up. But what we saw during the lockdown is kind of tremendous pressure that this quarantine that's in India, practically India is still in a lockdown, it's in a partial lockdown. And a lot of women really suffered because they didn't just have to take care of the Zoom calls, and do their office work at home. They also had to homeschool their children because all the schools in India haven't opened up. So everything is online, and kids below the age of 14 are not as familiar with technology in India. They're tech savvy, but they're not as familiar with how to do their schoolwork on Zoom and how to conduct and participate in different classes. So in India, you have to also understand that India works on domestic help. No matter, even domestic helps have domestic help, So
yeah, we have that in Dubai too. That's something I have to say.
So suddenly you had your part-time domestic help not coming in because of the spread of COVID-19. So as a woman, you didn't just have work to do at home, but you also had kids to take care of and to manage to homeschool them, and you had to manage the kitchen. So we saw a lot of women, moving to freelancing during this lockdown. But I feel that in terms of women joining workforce, the graph is only going higher and steeper. And I see a lot of potential and possibilities in India. I mean, the kind of encouragement that's there in the community right now about, for the daughters and daughter-in-laws to join the workforce and do something for themselves, even if it's just a small entrepreneurial venture or joining a corporation and doing a professional full-time work. There's a lot of support that's there, which is not there when we went to college, Seline. It wasn't that popular then. Like right now, every mother who's sending their kids to America would say, do your internships. But when we were in college, our parents didn't call us and said, this summer you do your internship instead of coming back home. So, yeah, so there's a difference in the way we're seeing as a community, the way we're responding to women rising up on the professional ladder, it's very encouraging. It's very encouraging. And the acceptance of girl child has also gone up. And there are a lot of NGOs working towards girl education as well. So I see the future bright uh, for our gender in India. There's a long way to go, of course, but we've come a long way, and that says something. But before we go, we've got 3 minutes before Instagram signs us out.
Okay.
I want to ask you if you've got any final thoughts for our audience, because Instagram signs you off after an hour of logging in.
Oh, do they? I didn't know
Yeah.
that. Well, I just want to say, I just want to quickly add to your point that there are some people out there who still judge a woman's worth based on their ability to, I don't know, meet the expectations of society. Like, marry at a certain age or have kids, as you mentioned. That still exists, but I think that's becoming less. It's not that it doesn't exist, it's still there.
Yeah.
That pressure is there. And I just want women to know that if they're facing that pressure, realize that you have a choice. Culture is not destiny, it's a handbook. And it's a set of guidelines. And if any of those work for you, sure, take them as your own. But if they don't feel guilty to be like, look, this isn't working for me. This doesn't take me where I want to go. It doesn't make me add to my identity. So feel comfortable about saying that despite the pressure you may face. Of course, if you're in a life-threatening situation, don't do that. Because, sometimes there are some women who have to deal with very, very oppressive families. But if you do have that choice, stand up for yourself and don't feel guilty about it. As long as you're not doing anything unethical, anything that's against the law, or anything that's hurting anybody, don't feel bad about being yourself and being an individual, because we really need women to step up their game and be who they want to be, reach their potential. And I think and culture can definitely help you do that, but it can also they can hinder you. So that's what me and Gunjan really want to get across to all the women out there who are having a difficult time balancing their cultural values.
Thank you, Seline, for the wonderful conversation.
Thank
Everyone,
you.